Hey all, welcome to the lounge. I just got finished recording my empirical analysis of who I think is going to win the 2020 election. Now it's time for sort of my own biased view on who I'd like to see win. And first, I'll give you guys sort of my political biases. I am Canadian, not American, and I am sort of a left of center Canadian, which in American terms means I'm way left of center. The Canadian Conservative Party is probably a lot more closely aligned with the American Democrats than with the American Republicans, just to give you guys some idea of the difference. Now, had I been able to vote in American elections during the course of my lifetime, I would have voted for John Kerry in '04, I would have voted for Obama twice, and then I would have voted for Gary Johnson beyond that, because I thought he was a pretty decent dude, and I found both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to be pretty unappetizing type of candidates. Now, in the 2020 election, I would like to see Joe Biden defeat Donald Trump, which, as I said, I think is probably going to happen. Though there are some caveats on that prediction, I wouldn't necessarily vote for Joe Biden living in every single state, but I do want to see him win. So let me explain that a little bit. See, Joe Biden is a whole lot more likable than Hillary Clinton, and he certainly put together a more progressive platform than Hillary Clinton's 2016 platform. However, it's very difficult to say what on that platform will actually be acted upon, and it's also true to say that Joe Biden, as well as Kamala Harris, are both corporatist establishment Democrats, which makes them incredibly problematic to most of the grassroots type of Democratic voters. Now, the only problem with that is they're facing off against Donald Trump, a corporatist, and Mike Pence, a corporatist. So it's kind of all an even kind of split on that. During the primaries, I found Joe Biden to be sort of a meh kind of candidate. I rated him like maybe sixth or even seventh. I felt that his overall strength was that he was so appealing to older, more centrist voters that it would be very difficult for Donald Trump to defeat him, and that he obviously had a lot of experience with the White House and the presidency and could hit the ground running. However, I was still very meh about him. That all said, how good or bad a candidate is does come down to the incumbent that he's running against. And Joe Biden is running against Donald Trump, which makes an enormous difference. Now, I see Donald Trump as a very, very unique president. First off, he's kind of like the broken clock of presidents, meaning you can look at him almost 24 hours a day and he's going to be saying something. And usually the thing he's saying is both ridiculous, unsubstantiated, and more blatantly, usually just a lie. However, as a result of this broken clock analogy, you can also look at him a couple of times a day and he'll be absolutely right about something, and he'll be saying something that's quite smart, and yet it'll just kind of be rejected by the whole mainstream media and political apparatus just because it's not the kind of thing that they want an establishment person who's in control of the system to be saying. Is this uniqueness worth re-electing the man? I would say most definitely not. The other way in which Donald Trump is unique is that he is a uniquely dangerous, unstable, unfit liar of a president. Currently, I'm about halfway through Bob Woodward's second book, Rage, and I did read the first one as well that I reviewed on this channel, Fear, Trump in the White House. There's, just like in the first book, in the second book, what you get is the impression that everybody who works with Donald Trump feels like they have to manage him. They feel like he is the generic terrible boss, doesn't know anything, doesn't want to learn anything. You just kind of got to manage him. Nobody trusts him. There are alliances within the White House of people who are sort of saying, okay, let's you and me work together and try to keep the president on track, sort of thing. And that seems to happen a lot. Now, in terms of Donald Trump's performance over the last 4 years, you can sort of break down any president into a war and peace, foreign policy, and economy category and just kind of rate them how they did in all three. Now, interestingly, on war and peace, Donald Trump is not a bad president. He is extremely averse to war. He is extremely averse to troops being somewhere, to spending money on those troops. And you see that in Bob Woodward's books all the time. The generals that Trump hires are in a constant battle to try to convince him to stay in certain conflicts and wars, and he's constantly trying to get out. Now, even in that particular folder where Donald Trump does pretty well, he still has a major failure, which is he doesn't grasp how feeding the military-industrial complex contributes to more war. So while on one hand he's constantly trying to withdraw troops and pull them and close certain facilities and so forth, he's also feeding the Pentagon record amounts of money and resources, and that of course empowers the war machine. And you can actually see that in some of the books where the generals are like, well, he's constantly trying to stop wars and we don't like that, but on the other hand, he's constantly feeding us cash. In the foreign policy area, Trump actually again does fairly well, surprisingly well. He has created more peace agreements than wars. He has done very unusual maverick type stuff to reach out to various leaders all over the planet that traditional presidents would never reach out to, and I don't think that that's a negative. So simply from the war and peace and foreign policy aspects alone, in terms of actual achievements, I do not consider Donald Trump to be the worst president ever. In fact, he's really about average or even above average in those two categories. Now, economically, there's a whole lot of myths about Donald Trump. For example, that he's such a great president to the economy. I don't see it that way at all. In fact, I see the economic achievements of Trump as mostly a scam. What he's done over his presidency, as far as I can tell, is pass tax cuts for the wealthy, a lot of them. That was his signature 2018 tax cut bill. That bill made him, his buddies, and many corporations very rich. Did they create jobs with that wealth? No, they didn't. Largely, they did share buybacks of their own stocks with that wealth and made the stock market go up. But if you compare the jobs from Obama's last, let's say, 3.5 years and Trump's jobs for his 3.5 years before COVID hit, what you see is actually an extremely flat pattern where the exact same recovery that Obama was overseeing just sort of kept going at the same pace. However, while Trump was running his portion of the economic recovery, he cut revenues with those taxes, but he didn't cut spending. And as a result, the US deficit and US national debt, even before COVID ever hit, was going out of control at a speed that would make even Obama and George Bush 43 blush. So Trump has really been a mixed bag as a president. Then you have to factor in his character flaws. And I don't think that you can actually rate Trump without going into his character flaws. The clinical narcissism, and I do mean clinical narcissism, the constant, blatant, often unprovoked lying, the will to set an extremely divisive tone, that hasn't been helpful during the Black Lives Matter and all of that type of social unrest. And overall, just the whole tone that he sets in the presidency is a very negative one that's very destructive. And as a Canadian, I feel like I'm kind of watching the institutions and government structures of the American system almost cracking at their pillars and showing signs of wear. And I'm honestly not sure that the institutional side of the American system can survive another 4 years of Donald Trump. That doesn't mean that I would vote for Joe Biden in every single state. As we all know, in the United States, there's only a handful of states, maybe 15 of them, that are actually competitive during an election. And all other states are quite non-competitive. If I lived in a even semi-competitive state, I would vote for Joe Biden just to ensure that Trump doesn't get back in. If I lived in a non-competitive state, then I would probably end up voting for Jo Jorgensen, the libertarian female candidate who's running for president. Now, she has absolutely zero chance of winning anything. She can't even win a single state. Unlike in 2016, where Gary Johnson actually got half-decent amounts of coverage, Jo Jorgensen is facing a total media blackout since both parties are considering her to be a spoiler candidate. However, she's actually not that terrible of a candidate. For example, she is the only candidate who is willing to acknowledge the incredible civil liberties violations that have happened during COVID and is actually running on a platform that denounces those. Whereas Joe Biden, for instance, is running on a platform of he wants to have mandatory mask mandates nationwide. Like, who runs on less freedom of choice, honestly? Like, it's crazy. So yeah, guys, that's my biased analysis. Long story short, in most states, vote Biden. And also, as far as Congress, I would vote against any Republican senators, simply because they had an opportunity to impeach Trump and get rid of him for a perfectly good reason, requesting a foreign nation to do an investigation of his political opponent, and instead, in exchange for getting the money that they were promised by Congress, that was a great reason to impeach Trump, and they didn't take it, showing pretty deep corruption. Now it looks like they're set to vote on Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement, doing something extremely hypocritical after they wouldn't give Obama his pick. Now, after stealing that one, they're going to give Trump his pick, like 6 weeks before an election. That's pretty rotten. All those guys have got to go in the Republican Senate. If this whole analysis was useful to you, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and we'll see you all next time.